Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Energy
We are
Realities
live.
podcast. We are live. Yes, we are, I think. We're here. It's a slow news week. There's not much to talk about, but we're going to try to fill an hour. There's nothing going on in the world. And okay, I'm kidding. All hell's broken loose in the Middle East, and there's a lot of other stuff happening in the energy space. And so we're going to have a roundtable discussion today with my co-host, Dr. Tammy Nemeth, who is in the UK this morning. How are you today, Tammy?
Hi, David. Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm just lovely. I'm tanned and rested, ready to go. I'm all red-faced from my little cruise to the Bahamas, and I managed to get. This was the first time, I swear to God, my wife and I have been married 44 years. This is the first time she got more sunburned than I did.
Oh my gosh.
Vacation. It's never happened before. So anyway, I never thought I could get a tan, but I actually got a little tan on my face the first time. I guess my Irish blood is flowing out of my system as I get older. Anyway.
Well, you're refreshed, right?
Yes, I'm refreshed
and rested.
Unfortunately, Stu's not refreshed. He's circling the drain over there in the lower right-hand corner. I'm not sure what's up with that. Irina Slav is in Bulgaria. How are you today? Irina, can you hear me? Have we lost everybody?
I'm great, but I think...
No, Irina's frozen.
I'm still here.
Stu's lost. Dang, we had such a good start to the show, too.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happened.
Yeah. It's not me, is it?
The CIA got to you there for a minute.
You all disappear or freeze.
I just removed the X feeds. We are now live. I apologize. I got the warning. I just killed the feed. So X is now dead.
What? What do you mean X is dead?
The feed to X would not allow us to come online for LinkedIn and YouTube.
Well, those turkeys.
That's awesome.
Don't know why.
Sounds like predatory Elon Musk behavior. He's done that with Substack too, so wouldn't surprise me a bit. I love you, Elon, but damn, man, you got to stop this kind of crap. Okay, Irina, back to you in Bulgaria. How are you today? Irina doesn't seem to be able to hear me. She's frozen.
Uh-oh.
Holy smokes. I'm beginning to think maybe the NSA doesn't want us talking about any of this.
Yeah,
well, Stu,
I mean...
Stu, how are you today in Abilene, Texas?
I'm doing just great.
Okay.
I've got lots of great things going on. I can't wait to get off of this podcast and get to my day trading because the market is going south, but my investments are going up.
Well, good. Good. I need your advice then. Mine are not going up at the moment. Okay. Well, we hope Irina will be able to rejoin us here. There she is. There you are.
I am here.
Oh my gosh.
You unfroze. Back to you. One last try. How are you this morning in Bulgaria? Or this afternoon? You can't hear me.
I can hear you, but you keep freezing and you keep disappearing and nothing says that there's anything wrong with my connection. So I have no idea what's happening.
Wow. Okay. Should we try to log out and log back in and see if we get a better situation, Stu?
I don't know. I think it'll kill the feed and then we're just totally screwed, but I'm willing to try it.
Let's try to power through. Obviously, the big story this week is the war in Iran, or conflict. I guess we're not calling it a war act since there's a vote on the War Powers Act tomorrow. It's a conflict between Israel and the United States and Iran, and it looks like a lot of other countries are joining it. That's obviously shocking the oil markets and the LNG markets today. But there's a lot of other stuff we were going to talk about today. I guess we'll try to fit everything all in. Tammy, I'm going to start with you, throw it over to you. What is your key subject for today, for this roundtable discussion?
Well, I was going to talk about what happened with the IEA last week, which was really fascinating, and of course Iran. So before we get into Iran, I thought I would just mention that at the IEA meeting, David, you had an amazing Substack where you talked about Chris Wright's speech, which was very refreshing to some extent. But, if you were a net zero advocate, it was offensive. And it was sort of interesting where Chris Wright was saying, look, can we just drop all these net zero scenarios? It's never going to happen. Can we focus on real data and analysis and forward-looking stuff that includes all forms of energy, particularly oil and gas and coal, and not just, oh my gosh, it's all going to be left in the ground and everything's going to be wind, solar, battery backup kind of thing. And the EU representatives sort of took issue with this and tried to defend Fatty Birol and whatnot. So it was interesting to see that. But what I was primarily interested in was the Canadian involvement on the panel on innovation. And Tim Hodgson, who's the Energy and Natural Resources Minister in Canada, was asked about, well, how does this work for Canada when Mark Carney's touting climate competitiveness? What does that mean? And so Hodgson made some interesting points about climate competitiveness. And he had this one statement that was hilarious, where he said, Canada has the lowest carbon emission intensity LNG in the world, and we're proud of it. And it will be a differentiator on the world market. However, people today won't pay for that right now, but we think in the future, people will. So we're going to.
Why won't they pay for it? Because it's not competitive?
Right. So we're going to force our industry to be low carbon emission intensity, and we're going to increase the industrial carbon tax, and we're going to make all these methane rules and everything. And yeah, it's going to add cost to it. But hey, we believe in the future, will be competitive. What? People are going to pay for what's cheap. What's the lowest price, not what's, low emission, whatever. But it was this whole faith and hope thing where we believe. Well, okay, what's reality? And it's kind of like net zero, where we believe the people are going to get behind net zero. Well, what's the reality? People starve and they're frozen and everything. It can't afford their energy. It's so funny here in the UK. It's sad. There's these ads on the radio where they're encouraging pensioners to take out loans against their pension to help cover their expenses, including their energy bills. How sad is that? And so, it was interesting. I just want to tie this in a little bit to what the UK has been doing. So while everyone was distracted with the Epstein files and former Prince Andrew, whatever his current title is, being stripped of everything, Ed Miliband brought in community energy, which is the government's going to give £1 billion, when I thought there was a black hole in the finances, £1 billion to councils to invest in clean energy. And that can mean investing in wind and solar battery backup projects that are nearby, or it is to install solar and wind or whatever within the councils. So it's another way to divert taxpayer money into different things. So, while people are distracted by all these other things, I think they need to be careful what's being brought in while everyone's being distracted. So is this going to make things competitive for the UK? No, it's going to make everything more expensive. And then one last point, Ed Miliband was asked on BBC or some program, why not open up and expand North Sea production to help lower prices? And he said, well, that won't lower prices. And the problem is he's right, because so much of the expense and cost to UK energy users are all these connection fees, all these flat rates about, building up all the interconnections and building up the infrastructure to put the transmission lines from all these ridiculous wind projects all over the place. So those are fixed costs. And it doesn't matter. You can bring all this cheap natural gas into the system, and it's really not going to lower the prices very much
Right.
because of this weight and burden on the UK population. So those are my little bits before we get into the discussion of Iran.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic left-wing politics approach. You rig the system so that something goes one way and one way only, and then you complain on the other side, well, we can't do this because that won't work, right?
Right.
So they've got the system rigged now, and it's hilarious. It's not hilarious. It's tragic, actually.
It's sad. It's sad.
It's
Yeah.
really sad. Anyway, but that's how they function everywhere. Unfortunately, we're not immune to it in the United States, obviously.
As the blue
Irina.
states are finding out.
Yes, well, exactly. Yeah, we've got that enormous discrepancy in utility rates between the blue states and the red states. It's just, and that map is so stunning. It's amazing. People still can't make that cause and effect connection in their brains.
Yeah.
Irina, I'm going to let you take the next shot at what you wanted to bring to the discussion today. What issue did you want to focus on in our roundtable today?
First, I'd like to make a note about climate competitiveness and LNG competitiveness that Tammy mentioned. It reminded me of a company that was certifying LNG producers for methane emissions. That was a few years ago, and somebody from that company contacted me and said that clients are very, very interested in low methane emission LNG. And I asked, doesn't it carry a premium? People like their energy cheap. No. There are many people who want to buy clean LNG. Well, I haven't seen this market balloon, so I don't know what to say about that. But I have been having fun with energy analysts from investment banks and other outlets who have been doing a lot of forecast revisions right now after this weekend.
Uh-oh.
Oh no,
We've lost her.
I wanted to hear that.
Sorry so sorry about the technical difficulties today, folks. Let's go to Stu while Irina's frozen, and we'll let Stu take this shot, and then we'll go back to Irina when she unfreezes.
I would love to absolutely give the UK a shout out that they've got some solidarity with California. Katie Grimes, I interviewed her. She is the editor-in-chief over at the California Globe. And they've got another round of CBAM type activity with carbon reporting and everything else rolling around. It may take out, they had 30 refineries in California, and they are now going to have 7. And they are now going to go to 0 if this is rolled out and it's they're moving it forward. Yeah. It is bad. Can you imagine the entire West Coast with no refineries? That's exactly what's happening.
Well, it is, yeah. I mean, and it's intentional. That's the fantasy that the Newsom administration and governors. I mean, he's not the first governor of that state. Jerry Brown is a freaking lunatic, for crying out loud, and had him before Newsom. And to be honest, Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't much more realistic than the Democrats in that regard. So they've had a long line of governors in that state who just live in this fantasy world where sugar plum fairies and unicorns can power their grid. So yeah, you're right, Stu. I mean, it's going to be down to 0 refineries eventually if policies don't change. And I mean, given the way Californians vote, or at least the way the votes are counted in California, there doesn't seem to be a big prospect for anything changing anytime soon.
No, so hats off to the UK for leading the charge on stupidity and having California follow. And then we have Germany absolutely jumping off the lemming. They used to be the poster child of beautiful green energy. Then they blew up their nuclear reactors, and now they've got some serious problems. Now we've got the Iran problem coming around, and diesel prices in Europe are going to go through the roof. So buckle up. Anyway, sorry, Irina. Welcome back, Irina.
Okay.
Welcome back.
And
Can
now
you hear
she's
us,
frozen
Irina?
again.
She's frozen again.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
this is awful. This is awful. So I'm sorry, folks. We will hear from Irina eventually, I hope and pray. I'm going to take the floor now and talk about my key issue that I wanted to discuss today. It's not really an issue, it's a celebration. February 24th, I believe, was the 10-year anniversary of Cheniere Energy's first LNG shipment from the United States, just 10 years ago. The first shipment of LNG took place. That came after Barack Obama had signed a bill in his final year as president. In 2015, December 2015, he signed an omnibus budget bill that allowed for LNG exports from the United States internationally and oil exports. And Cheniere shipped its first shipment 10 years ago. By 2023, just 7 years later, which is a blink of an eye in time in these multi-billion-dollar investments that have to take place to build these terminals. Just 7 years later, the United States became the leading exporter of LNG globally. It's a testament to the incredible wealth of resource the United States has in natural gas. People do not understand the true magnitude of the resource. We have barely even begun to tap, for example, the massive natural gas resource in the Eagle Ford Shale, which is gigantic. It's so huge that people really can't get their arms around it because we haven't drilled a lot of wells in the eastern third of that formation, which is where most of the dry gas resides. And so we just have this immunity of resource. We have an incredibly innovative industry in the United States that is able to move nimbly and quickly to take advantage of a market situation that developed seemingly overnight for these international exports of LNG. Just an anecdote. In 2003, we have this thing called the National Petroleum Council in the United States, which is a federal advisory committee that reports to the Secretary of Energy. In 2002, the Bush administration wanted us to do an assessment of the natural gas resource in the United States. So remember, this was just 2 years after we started drilling for shale gas, 3 years after. The Barnett Shale was really the only known resource of shale gas at that time. And so we spent a year, I participated in it. I chaired one of the subcommittees on the study. ExxonMobil and Anadarko Petroleum, which was still a standalone company at the time, co-chaired the study. We had 100 or so of the best minds in the industry and from NGOs and from government participating in the study. And our conclusion when we published the study in 2003 was that by 2010, the United States would be importing about 15% of its natural gas needs because we're just running out of natural gas. We just didn't have enough resource. We published the study. 2 years later, the Marcellus Shale was discovered. Haynesville was discovered shortly thereafter. And by 2007, the whole picture had completely turned around. And we had this enormous wealth of shale gas resource. The shale revolution was in full swing by 2008. And we realized very quickly after that in the industry, I was in the industry at the time, everyone realized, oh, you know what? We're going to need to be able to export this gas eventually because there's just too much of it. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to fully exploit the resource.
Yeah.
And so really, it was around 2010 when the industry started thinking about, we really need to get empowering legislation to build these terminals and export this gas. And that all finally got done. And by 2016, the industry had kicked off. And now the United States commands 25% or so of the global market for exported LNG. And today, this morning, about 20 minutes before we went on the air, Qatar announced it was shutting in its LNG production because of the Iranians are firing missiles at their facilities. And so now there's going to be even more demand for U.S. natural gas, at least in the short term. So it's a real blessing that this industry has developed as quickly and massively as it has. And now we've lost Stu again. So,
well, it's, David, I think it's really interesting that you must have been happy to be wrong after that report, right?
I've never been so wrong in my life about anything.
Yeah, I remember that debate where it was when your report came out and they were like, oh, we're going to have to build all these LNG facilities to import natural gas. We're going to have to increase our imports from Canada. And I think what's interesting about North America is historically Canada has been a really reliable backstop to the United States when there's been international or global geopolitical issues that have happened. This happened in 1967, where Canada was able to backstop the United States when there was the attempted embargo, which didn't work. And part of the reason why it didn't work was that the United States was able to ramp up production. Canada was able to backstop it. And then that kind of fell apart in the 70s for various reasons. But, Canada does produce a lot of natural gas. We have incredible resources up in the sort of Alberta, northern British Columbia region that, they want to increase and whatnot. So in this case, it's a pity that Canada doesn't have better pipelines to the East Coast, because right now, if I could just address something that Andrew Michaelim has put forward there about Australia, Canada accepted its first LNG cargo load from Australia in the Maritimes, and quite usually they import from abroad when there's spikes in weather-related sort of increases. Normally, until about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there was offshore natural gas up by Nova Scotia, the Sable Island field, and that kind of got depleted, and they decommissioned those sites, but they import most of their natural gas from the United States. It's just that kind of geological way for the pipelines to go there. And so Western Canadian natural gas goes as far as Montreal and parts of Quebec, but it doesn't make it into the Maritimes, which is one of these peculiarities of the Canadian situation. But we can send it south if we have to, if that means that the United States can increase its LNG exports to the world where they need it, to fill the gap that Qatar, to fill Qatar pulling out and so on. So it's really fascinating how these interrelationships work. And I was gratified to see that Mark Carney right away supported the efforts in Iran. That
really
the United States
stepped up almost immediately.
Yeah.
It's really something.
Yeah.
It was unexpected. I didn't expect that to come quite so fast, but he really jumped right in.
Yeah. Especially given what his relationship is with the UK and the EU, who were dragging their feet and didn't want to support the action. So until UK was kicking and screaming, sort of. But interesting.
Well, that was odd too. I mean, I couldn't understand why Starmer jumped out like that so quickly. It seemed to be kind of a rash decision, but of course, I don't have any real insight into it. But then yesterday he relented and didn't really understand his reasoning for that either. But I'm sure he had a difficult phone call with Trump at some point in there.
Maybe, yeah.
What do you think, Stu?
I think the world is healing. It's going to be a bumpy ride for a few weeks, but I believe that the attack on Saudi Arabia is a wake-up call for the Gulf states. Their refinery has just been hit, and their biggest refinery is now on fire. And there is I'm afraid to try this. I would like to try to share my screen, but considering our technical difficulties here, I don't want to really kind of blow that up. But when you sit, so to speak, the fact that the United States hit Karg Island, we actually hit Karg Island and hit the power plant. The Karg Island is 90% of the Iranian crude shipments go through that. And I can try to bring up the tanker traffic I've been watching. It's kind of like a video game. They're all waiting for insurance papers. I almost feel like I'm watching an old World War II movie. You got papers? You got papers? No, I got no papers. No papers for you. Holy smokes, Batman. The whole thing is, it's the insurance people. We've already mentioned this. And I believe that if we see how this goes around, the pricing matrices and mechanisms have already been wiped out with the current regime. Their financial systems are wiped out. Secretary Bessent declared war on the regime that's in power in Iran. And I guarantee you, the new regime, if they have a hope, they will have a new financial system. That new financial system will be the same one that is just dropped into Venezuela. I just saw that NJ Anouk, who is the head of the African Energy Chamber, just met with the president of Venezuela. Why? So that he can do business with Venezuela and bring in African oil companies to work in Venezuela. It is a path to freedom. And Tammy, you brought the key point up on this, and that is China has been buying deep discounted oil, and they have lost it. Think about it. They lost Venezuela. They've lost Iran for all practical purposes. Iraq still can ship out through the Dark Fleet because they can go around on their pipelines on the south end, and they can still get out there. I guarantee you that. I've already looked this morning. There's tankers already loading up on the south end of Iraq. So when you look at the number of tankers, if we watch what happens, you had, I believe it was a French country. France helped a country help take down a Russian Dark Fleet tanker last week. Now, what you're going to see is more of that Dark Fleet go away, and you're going to see Saudi Arabia back into control on OPEC. You're going to see a stabilization of oil prices, and I believe that the world is going to heal.
I'd like to add about China there. So China receives 13 to 15% of its seaborne oil supplies from Iran at, as you said, a steeply discounted price. But there's also the case of the billions in Chinese investments through the Belt and Road Initiative. And that was secured under I think it was a 25-year strategic partnership with Iran. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with whatever regime takes power. Will that be honored? What that means for Chinese investments within Iran. And, that being said, America's distracted in the Middle East, and this could be a benefit for China and Southeast Asia and asserting whatever it wants to do in sort of its sphere of influence. So I think we need to kind of keep an eye on that as well. But my sense of it, and I don't know if you guys agree with this, is that the reason why Trump went after Iran is really about peace in Gaza and the region around Israel, because you can't have peace in that area as long as Iran is fighting proxy wars, supporting terrorist organizations. And how can the Board of Peace be successful if Iran is still there in the background, funneling money it gets from China into these various groups and organizations, and doing nuclear at the same time?
Why do you think Secretary Bessent said at Davos, he has eviscerated the financial system of Iran? They went in the finance section first, just proving your point. Yeah. The next point is they had to take care of Venezuela to get the financial system built in order to support a new government. But if they don't have control of the finances, the government will just start funneling money back around to the Houthis and the Blowfish again.
Right.
So you've got to control the money. And I think that there's going to be more money for the Iranian people.
Couple things. First, on the Ras Tanura refinery hit by that Iranian missile. We don't know the extent of that. Refineries have fires all the time, or not all the time, but it's a frequent occurrence, and sometimes it can be very minor, but it can look really, really bad, right? You get a lot of black smoke, and we just don't know the extent of that. So just because there's a fire going on there and a lot of smoke doesn't necessarily mean that major refinery is going to be out of commission for any length of time. It could, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Second point is that totally agree with everything Tammy and Stu just said about the implications of this with China. Everything we've seen the Trump administration do over the last few months relates to China. Everything in Venezuela, the Panama Canal, Greenland, Cuba, even the back and forth with Carney in Canada and the EU has to do with China and America's desire to halt Chinese hegemony in these other regions of the world, specifically, most importantly, in the Western Hemisphere, but also in the Middle East. And because China has propped up, just as Russia did before them, China has propped up the Iranian regime for a long time. It would have fallen long ago were it not for the support from Russia and then China. Just as the United States' a climate alarm industry would have fallen a long time ago, were it not for all the money pouring in from Russia, Saudi Arabia, and now China into those organizations. So all this Chinese influence, everything revolves around that. And, I just think that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to rid this planet of these perverse influences like the Iranian regime that has sponsored all this terrorism for 47 years since Jimmy Carter stupidly allowed that regime to come into power. I hate war, didn't want the United States to go into any new conflicts in the United States. It's never worked out well for us in the Middle East as a country, as we've seen under both Bushes.
Yeah.
This is not a Bush sitting in the White House, and everybody's got their own opinion about whether that's for better or worse. But this is a different thing. This is not 200,000 American boots on the ground, which Lindsey Graham has lusted after for the last 30 years, and John McCain before him. This is a targeted campaign that's mainly through the air, and hopefully won't linger for 19 years like Afghanistan did.
Can I add something about that Saudi Arabia refinery? My understanding is that they shot down drones and debris hit the refinery, and that's what caused the fire, and it was put out right away. So that's what Reuters and Bloomberg are reporting. So, but it's fog of war, and we don't always have the most accurate information. I'm wondering though, what do you think about, I know, Stu, you said that the world's going to heal once this is all over. And I'm wondering what the trend is with oil prices and natural gas prices with these announcements, and just how temporary that will be. I mean, if Iran comes back online a couple months from now or something, will that cause the prices to go down? Right now, there's this temporary increase in global prices. How high do you think it will go? If I could ask you to speculate, both David and Stu.
I personally think it's a short-term thing. I am an optimist. I believe that this is going to be taken care of. I mean, one of the videos I saw of, I believe it was 23, a person watching these Tomahawk missiles going over and hitting the Ayatollah's house was pretty amazing when you see these things going in.
Well, I'll tell you what,
I would not want to stand up to the United States military, and I believe firmly that the best intentions is in play right now for the Iranian people. The great Iranian people need their country back.
Yeah.
And we do not need to put a puppet government in. I want a government by the Iranians, for the Gulf state countries, period. It needs to be governed by them. I am not a fan of it, but the CIA, I heard, did get, you got to love our comments coming in on some of these things.
Yeah, I think I upset some people there. That's okay.
Hey, get your own podcast and then make your own opinions known. And to Mr. JSDK4DC, have a great day. And when you sit back and take a look at where we're going, I see it could spike. It is free speech, dude. Have a great day. And by the way, I'm the #1 podcast in the United States for energy. So have a great day. I really felt good saying that one. And I'm done trolling him. But when we sit back and take a look at the financial aspect of the money, it'll hit 70, 80 bucks, 90 bucks. It doesn't matter. It's only for a short term. They're not going to hedge their bets because the folks that do the hedging is about how long is this going to play out? And I believe the steady price, great Saudi Arabia leadership wants stable pricing. They would rather have $80 oil that they can plan on and they can sit back because they have been diversifying their economy brilliantly. Hats off to the Saudi Arabia leadership on that. And I guarantee you, Patrick Devine, I love your comment. And when you sit back and take a look, energy security starts at home, but energy dominance comes through your exports. And as we see Qatar wiping out 20% of their of the LNG exports, who's still exporting? So, I see our prices are temporary. Am I going to make money as my trades are doing quite well today? Heck yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's temporary. I think it's just a matter of the degree of temporariness at this point. As we've talked about, the main problem with the Strait of Hormuz, there is no actual blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has not mined the Strait of Hormuz like it did in the 80s. It's a threat. Okay. And the threat convinced Lloyd's of London and the other insurers, Aon and others, that they didn't want to assume the elevated risk for those insuring those cargoes. And they told the shippers, their current policies were null and void until we have a larger risk premium. Those policies are being renegotiated as we speak. And I suspect by Wednesday, you're going to see pretty much, maybe not completely normal flow through the strait, but more of a normal type of flow through the strait. Right now, I mean, even with the strait effectively shut down since Saturday afternoon, we only have seen a 7.5% increase in the Brent price for crude. That is not a big spike. That's a fairly, it's not a pinprick, and it's going to cause gasoline prices and diesel prices to rise. But if it's short term, if let's say we get normal flows restored by the end of this week, then, the price is going to start going back down. We might get up to 85 maybe today. We'll see when the U.S. trading opens here in just a little bit. We'll see where it goes.
David, being a little more mathematical, Iran's exports to the global market are in the dark fleet, and they're not totally counted in. Period.
Well, that's right. There's all this floating storage out on the seas too, in addition to that.
Saudi Arabia put out the most oil they've put out in the last several years, over the last month, they knew this was coming.
Yes.
They already got all their oil shipment. So there's a lot of buffer out there that was already planned in. So I'm very numbers guy here, looking at all my screens. I'm looking going, this is going to blow over.
What's interesting is, like, on X, formerly Twitter, there were a bunch of comments from net zero advocates saying, well, we wouldn't have to worry about choke points if everything was solar, because you can't put a choke point on the sun. And I was thinking, but those are the same people who were encouraging, spraying the atmosphere to dim the sun. Those are the same people. But I thought it was funny. But one of the things that I think you wanted to talk about was that screen cap you had of Bloomberg and Javier Blas, where is net zero really a dead concept? And he said, net zero is dead, long live renewables. And I thought what was interesting is how the climate activists and net zero supporters are really just changing the language like they always do once a term becomes unpopular or people push back on it. And I was watching a panel of accounting, banking, and securities people, and they were talking about how companies were using the find and replace function for anything ESG or net zero related in their plans or their disclosures that they put forward. So it's still there. The governments are still pushing it, but they're just using vague terms, right? They're changing the language. Like Canada uses climate competitiveness, which is, a bit of an oxymoron in the context of Canadian resources. And, the EU, Canada, the UK have binding laws. They have ongoing implementation. The UK so far has not changed the name of its Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. Talk about a oxymoron there. But I think the death here that Javier Blas was talking about was really about diplomatic language rather than actually getting rid of net zero. And I can see these countries doubling down on it now with the situation in the Middle East, saying, let's build more wind and solar and batteries so that we're not dependent on the Middle East oil and gas.
Yeah, I saw some guy from Portugal this morning. He's some kind of analyst in Portugal, talking about the prime minister there has redoubled his commitment to running the whole grid on wind and solar and batteries. This is a country that just suffered a massive, enormous blackout last summer because they didn't have enough baseload running on their power grid, and the whole damn system failed, right?
Yeah.
But they're just doubling down, tripling down. And why is that? Because at its base, at its heart, we always have to remember that the climate change movement is nothing more than a far left political movement using this climate hysteria as the basis for implementing socialist authoritarian governance and control from central governments around the world. So, yes.
The red heart of the green movement.
Right. Yes. And so it's no different than a communist movement in the Netherlands or whatever. They're always going to keep doubling, tripling down on failure using different talking points because their goal is not helping the climate. Their goal is a central authoritarian communist style of government. And so everything they do, when you look at it from that point of view, everything they do and say makes perfect sense.
Yeah, for sure. And so that ties in also to the other story that I think you wanted to talk about, David, which is the court ruling that Greenpeace has to pay the hundreds of millions of dollars in damages for the Dakota Access Pipeline incidents. And Greenpeace trying to say, oh, we had nothing to do with it. We weren't doing all this organizing, which is just, are you joking me? Yeah.
They're so pathetic. I wrote about all that stuff in real time. I probably wrote 10 pieces on it while it was happening at Forbes. And Greenpeace was at the center of it. And the damages they caused to the dadgum climate, not the climate, but the environment there in that area was just enormous. It takes years to recover from. The cleanup costs alone were upwards of $100 million just from the mess they left behind. And all the animals that died, they had all these dogs and cats that people brought with them that they weren't taking care of. And It was awful. It was just a horrible display of how little these people really care about the environment. It's all about politics. And, I'm glad that judge made that decision. I wish he hadn't, he cut the damages award by the jury in half. And still Greenpeace is screaming, it went from 672 million, I think, to 345 million. But Greenpeace says, well, we can't afford to pay it. And so, okay, well, fine, then go out of business. That's the solution here. And I hope that's the ultimate outcome.
I would like to see.
Sorry, go ahead.
I would like to see the other oil and gas companies get a spine and take everybody to court and give them their own lawfare back. The only winners out of it.
Exxon suing the Attorney General of California personally.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
That's the way it should be.
Unfortunately, Exxon's probably the only major oil company that would be willing to do that. But this is it's why Exxon's more competitive than all the other major oil companies, frankly. It's one of the main reasons.
I'd have to say this was absolutely a horrible production.
We've had all these issues. I just wonder what's actually going on. But
and for anybody that's listening, I apologize for that JSDK4DC. I banned him from the thing. So if anybody ever makes comments that I don't like, sorry, I'm gonna wipe you out of the whole program here. Have a great day.
And when he's using profanity.
Yeah, right.
You're out.
We've always done that with people.
I really enjoy having I don't care what your opinion is. I want to hear about it. But you start doing that kind of crap, have a great day.
Yeah. I mean, I can cuss all I want to, but it's my podcast, not yours.
Yeah, but I mean, the type of cussing you're doing wasn't what he was doing, which could get us banned from YouTube. So it's like, why take that risk? Free speech and all that. Talk to YouTube about not allowing that kind of profanity. So
just avoid the F word and personal attacks, and you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to have those conversations. But I find it interesting about Greenpeace. If I can just go back to this for a second.
Yes.
They had all this money, and now suddenly they say they have no money. And the Greenpeace International is suing Energy Transfer in the Netherlands. So for whatever damages, saying it's the chilling effect and all this kind of garbage. What about the chilling effect Greenpeace has on other organizations when they smear and do all this other stuff? They won when Resolute Forest Industry tried to sue them. So I don't know where their money's gone. It's interesting.
Well, so China, this all goes to a lot of things the Trump administration's been doing. The NGO community has been decimated with the the cutbacks in the USAID budget. All that billions of dollars were flowing into those NGOs, which in turn poured money into Greenpeace and these other left-wing groups. And so a lot of that money flow's gone. A lot of the Chinese money is no longer flowing in because Besant's got control of the money flows. And it's a real problem for these conflict groups when they have to actually raise money the honest way, and that's very hard for them. So I wish them the best or the worst of luck. Actually,
what's sad is I truly enjoyed my 2 podcasts with Dr. Patrick Moore, one of the founders of Greenpeace. Cool cat. I didn't realize that I would get 2 hours each with him. And it was great hearing how it was started and then it was hijacked.
Yeah. Well, they all have been. I mean, even the ones that the industry used to be able to work with, and I won't name its 3-letter name, has been hijacked by the same people. And you can't work with them anymore because they're not honest brokers anymore. And that's a sad thing because it was really good to have at least one that was kind of an honest broker that you could actually work with and trust to keep its word. But now there aren't any. And that's a bad situation for trying to solve. And this gets me to my main point about these groups. They never want to solve a problem. We have to understand that they're not interested in actually solving problems. because solving problems means there's no conflict. And if there's no conflict, then they can't scare people into giving them money. So you're never going to solve any problem trying to work with any of these left-wing climate alarm groups. I'm talking to all of you folks still in the industry who think you're doing the right thing by reaching out and trying to work on these joint projects with them. I did it several times in my career, always to end up in a failed situation because you can't trust them to keep their word at the end of the day in any agreement you think you have with them. This is never going to change. It's only going to get worse over time. So that's the unfortunate thing about those groups. They have no actual interest in solving any problem. That's the truth. And okay, I guess my rant on that's over. But yeah, just
well, look,
I
think that's a really important point, because there are some really good environmental groups that were concerned about protecting certain elements of the environment. But it seems like over the past 10 or 15 years, their leadership has changed and they become far more focused on not necessarily preserving the environment in various areas, but to weaponize it in this quest for net zero. At least that's what I've observed in Canada, which is really unfortunate, because they had done some really good work, and I'm not going to name who they are, but it's really quite tragic that these groups that were established for a certain purpose had developed a really good reputation, and then were kind of gradually taken over and now conduct operations that are not in the best interests of the local environment. So yeah, it's unfortunate.
One last point on this. This dynamic we're talking about here, everyone, is why we have the hysteria over carbon dioxide in the first place. Because these groups, like the Sierra Club was a great example, working in the 70s and the 60s, the advocacy on behalf of endangered species, the advocacy for the major statutes like the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. Our environment in the United States during that period of post-World War II period of time was filthy. Okay, we had rivers catching on fire. We had raw sewage being pumped into rivers by major cities. The air was unbreathable in some of our major cities around the country. So what happened? These groups themselves succeeded in lobbying the government to pass these major statutes like the ones I just named, which were incredibly effective in doing what? Solving the problem of real pollution. So we get to around 1995 and all of a sudden they're having a hard time raising money because they've actually solved problems. Yeah. The environment's much, much cleaner. The average car in America produces less real pollution today than in a year than it did in a minute in 1979. Okay, incredibly successful. Major statutes and regulations under those statutes. So they had to find a reason to exist, and that's how carbon dioxide became the boogeyman. Okay, you've gotten rid of the real pollution, so now you have to define plant food, the literal basis for all life on the planet, as a pollutant.
That's why the World Economic Forum and that whole group is going after water next.
Oh,
they got to have something to control.
It's going to be the water. Yes, that's absolutely right. And they're already doing it. They're already moving that direction.
Yeah. They've been talking about that for some time, but yeah, they've really been sort of ramping up the research on water issues and whatnot, and putting Johan Rockstrom and Mariana Mazzucato in charge of that, which I think is rather disturbing, but that's a conversation for another day.
I'm sure we'll see the usual suspect universities involved, Cornell and Leeds and the usual suspect NGOs like RMI and several others here in the United States. They'll all get involved and concoct all these phony studies. And oh my God, it's going to be a new hysteria all over again.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just job insurance for us, though.
For sure. And the energy realities, and how else, with all this net zero stuff and all these other things, energy realities matter.
I think Stu's frozen again. Stu, are you
Uh-oh.
frozen? Okay. You were so still, man.
Oh, Stu, come on. I want to make just one last point about the International Energy Agency. So, I've been trying to find data, historical data for various reasons. And if I remember correctly, the IEA used to have their historical data was free, but now all of their data is behind a paywall. And it's like over €1,000 as an individual to access their data sets. And I'm like, well, the countries have paid for this data, I don't know how many times over. And if you want to have it so that the last 5 years data is behind a paywall, okay. But really stuff from the 70s and 80s, why is that behind a paywall? So my appeal is to Chris Wright, Mr. Energy Secretary of the United States. Please talk to Fatty Birol and find a way to make that historical data freely available to researchers.
I mean, think about that. That can only be an intentional effort to obscure the record, because
I don't know, right?
They do not rely on that for income, for support, for the continuation of the group. They have 90 plus countries that are subscribers who pay their bills.
Yeah.
That is an intentional effort to obscure the record. And yeah, Chris Wright ought to get on that. That'd be a great issue for him.
I don't quite understand why all that historical data is behind the paywall. It's insane. And, it makes it really difficult for researchers to find, accessible, reliable data in order to discuss what the historical developments have been over time for various issues concerning matters that the International Energy Agency covers. So, yeah. Mr. Wright, please, Secretary Wright, do something.
Mr. Secretary, get on it. Okay, I'm not giving him orders. Anything else for the good of the order? We are up against time. I think we've lost Stu's attention here.
I got things to do. I got to go make money.
I do too. All right.
I'm sorry that we lost Irina, because she
too.
would have had some really great things to
say. She
say.
sent an email saying her connection was messed up. So hopefully we'll have everybody on board for the full hour next Monday. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to let Stu get going on his day trading now.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.